Welcome. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Boardroom Insights from Award-Winning Directors. My name is Rachel Allen, and I am a Director and Officer at NACD Three Rivers Chapter. My day job is operating an outsourced general counsel business, through which I serve as the general counsel for two Pittsburgh-based companies, A-Link Technologies and Microbac Laboratories. I would like to thank the NACD Three Rivers Chapter annual sponsors. We would not be here without their generosity, and especially at this time when things are uncertain, we are extremely grateful. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please let me know or contact Mackay Whitfield. Sponsorships start as low as $3,000, and going forward as an added benefit, sponsors and members will receive complimentary attendance to all regular virtual programming like the one that we are conducting today. Our distinguished panel of Director of the Year award winners will share their toughest challenges and greatest challenges faced as board leaders, particularly pertinent in today's uncertain and unprecedented times. I would like now to introduce today's panelists. First, Sharon Fang, Board Director at Koppers Holdings and recipient of the 2017 Public Company Board of the Year Award. Sharon, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel. It's a really honor to join everyone this afternoon to talk about best practices in the boardroom. I'm sure I'm going to learn from everybody as much on this panel. Really looking forward to it. I joined Koppers board in 2009. So this is my 11th year serving on this board. I have really enjoyed my journey with this very unique board, which I can't wait to tell you more during our discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sharon. Our other panelist is Jim Kane. Jim is a board member at Pittsburgh Corning Corporation, the 2017 recipient of Leadership and Private Company Governance Award. Jim, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be with you all today. Appreciate you coming out. I was the chairman, president, and CEO of Pittsburgh Corning until 2017, and we'll talk more about that as we get into this. And in addition to my service at Pittsburgh Corning, I'm also on the board at NACD Three Rivers and Boys Hope and Girls Hope of Pittsburgh.
Thanks, Jim. Well, we're excited for the panel today. If the audience has any questions for the panel during our presentation, please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom window to ask them, and I will continue to keep an eye out for them. And I'm getting pretty good at this technology, so hopefully I'll be able to figure them out. And our panelists will answer as many of your questions as possible. So we're going to start with a question for Jim. Jim, since your company was privately owned, can you tell us a bit about how corporate governance worked at Pittsburgh Corning and how it changed over time?
Sure, happy to do so. Pittsburgh Corning was private, but it was founded in 1937 by Corning and PPG. So with two shareholders that were both Fortune 500 companies, our governance looked a lot more like a public company than it did a private company. And technically, we were an equity affiliate, so we really, they weren't involved in our business day to day at all. They were purely from a shareholder point of view. I would say that there were probably 4 different phases of governance at Pittsburgh Corning. In the early years, from 1937 until sometime in the middle 60s, it looked like any other public company would have looked. There were 2 board members from PPG, 2 board members from Corning, and the 5th board member was the CEO at the time. And those board members had fiduciary responsibility in very typical fashion. So they worried about CEO succession, strategy, major investments, and those kinds of things. And the other thing that was kind of unique that they did in those days was on both sides of the ownership table, they built bridges back to the shareholder organizations. So Pittsburgh Corning was able to benefit from a lot of technical and R&D kind of support that a company our size would have never benefited from in those days. In terms of board structure, it was pretty typical. There was a compensation committee, an audit committee, a compliance committee, and an executive committee with very traditional kinds of roles. The model started to change in the 1990s. Pittsburgh Corning got tied up, in asbestos litigation. And as the lawsuits mounted, the company's approach changed, the governance approach changed. So in 1962, we'd started a company in Europe called Pittsburgh Corning Europe. It was a subsidiary of Pittsburgh Corning Corp, the American company. But with these lawsuits mounting, it was dividended back to the shareholders. And at that point, we created two boards. And from that day in the 1990s until we sold the company in 2017, we ran the company as one company, but we had two boards. All the technical cooperation that we enjoyed for the first 40, 50 years of our existence disappeared as soon as the asbestos kind of crept into our lives. And the board focus really changed. Instead of looking to us to grow, the focus became more of how do we preserve the estate and kind of protect the assets, so that the mindset became very, very conservative. In 2000, Pittsburgh Corning Corp, the American company, filed Chapter 11. And when we did it, it was pretty complicated. It took us 16 years to get out because Corning had different interests than PPG had, than we had. And with a couple hundred different insurance companies around the globe, you can imagine what a tangle that was. It was also complicated by the fact that the plaintiffs' attorneys all wanted to use Pittsburgh Corning as a vehicle to get back into Corning and PPG to pierce those corporate veils. So governance continued the way that it had, but the composition of the board changed. Instead of being the CEO of Corning and the CEO of PPG, which it had been originally, it turned into finance and legal types of people, all with an idea of not just providing good governance at Pittsburgh Corning, but making sure that the corporate veil in each of those respective cases wasn't pierced. The only other change from a governance point of view was that we had to provide our financial reports on a regular basis to the bankruptcy court. The third phase was started about 2010. We were still in Chapter 11, but we had competition emerging in China. And I think the Corning and PPG directors recognized that if we continued to manage conservatively as we had been doing till that point, that we're going to risk doing great harm to the business. So we were able to persuade them at that point to change the mindset from asset preservation to growth. And they allowed us to invest about $100 million into the business over the next several years. We did emerge in 2016. I think we were on a good growth path at that point. And when we came out, we were donated to a trust. So part of the settlement was that the shares of Pittsburgh Corning Corp and Pittsburgh Corning Europe were going to be contributed to this asbestos trust, which was interesting in itself because we had to then learn about the governance of these trusts. So at the top of the trust is a trust advisory committee that oversees 3 trustees who are in effect the shareholders, and the trustees have under them governing the company a board of directors. And that brings me kind of the final phase. When we emerged, we got a whole new board of directors on about 2 weeks' notice. 5 of the people were brand new. I'd never met them, never talked to them, didn't know anything about them, and was not involved in the selection process. But they were all people that had a background in the asbestos world. They had relationships that went back into that world, and that's why they were basically selected by the Trust Advisory Committee to fill those roles. And we operated under that structure with those board members until we sold the company in 2017.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot of evolution in response to both company needs and situational. So you should be writing a textbook about private company governance during your retirement based on that experience.
Thanks for that.
Thanks. So Sharon, can you tell us how long you've been on the corporate Koppers board? I know it's been quite some time. And reflecting on the long experience that you've had, how would you describe the characteristics of the board?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So I was just listening to Jim. It was very interesting how different Koppers have journeyed through the history. Koppers is one of the oldest company in Pittsburgh, incorporated in 1915. has been in town for a really, really long time. In the 80s, after a hostile takeover by Beazer, the company gone through some turbulent times, but eventually the management buyout, and then we went IPO in 2006. So I get on the board in 2009, just a couple of years after we went public. So the company at that time has a very traditional board, has your traditional audit committee, MDC committee, and also we had a very unique committee, which is at the time called HES Committee, Health, Environment, and Safety Committee. Actually, the reason I joined the board was because my expertise in that particular area. It's a very unusual to have that committee. It's not required by regulation, but because the business we're in and the operations around the globe in this particular industry, it really reflects the board's conscientious decision to have this very unique committee. So when I joined the board, we have 8 board members. It started diversified right at that time. I was the second woman on the board of 8. And at the time, we already started seeing company and the board's intention to build diversity into the board. So it was a very exciting time at that time. And then actually over the 11 years I have been on the board, we actually established a new committee, the strategy and the risk committee. This is also, I think, it's a best practice for the board. Has a unique focus in the areas of risk, enterprise risk management. So I think we're a little bit on the front end of that curve as well. And just very recently, actually, we actually transformed the historically EHS committee into the sustainability committee. So now I actually chair the sustainability committee. And this is also one aspect that the board has intentionally established this with the focus on sustainability. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. I think those answers are really interesting. It shows that good corporate governance, while founded in certain fundamental principles, has to also be adaptable to each company's unique circumstances, and also be adaptable as those circumstances change over time. Given that you've had such very divergent experiences, I'm interested to hear what kind of advice you would give to a new member of a board based on that experience. If I was a new board member joining either a private or public company, what would I guess, a piece of advice that you would give me as I began my journey? Jim, I'll ask you first.
Okay, great. The first thing I do is I cultivate relationships with existing board members, 1 or 2 existing board members, so that you have a dialogue that works outside of and a relationship that works outside of the boardroom. I think that's good for context and understanding. I would take the time to go and visit and learn the business. I wouldn't be afraid to ask the dumb questions. We all have them, and as you come to a board as a new member, it's a good chance for everybody to refresh and benefit from that. And then I think as you approach a new board position, I would suggest that you offer help where you can, because that's a good way to engage.
Thanks. Sharon?
Yeah, so I think Jim covered the really good ground. That would be the points I would have made, but I think I just want to add one thing. When I joined the board, I'm a very active executive. So I truly learned by mentoring by a very experienced board member, actually board chair at the time, Dr. David Hillenbrand, how to be distinguished between a board member's duty and a responsibility and executive. So as an executive, especially also my personality is pretty much just roll up the sleeve and do it, right? But it's really important to learn the distinction of governance and also the executive duty. So it's one of those things you have to sit back and watch some experienced board member, understand where the borderlines is, and fulfill your duty as a board member, but not overbearing onto the executive team. I think that's a huge learning, especially for I was the first time on the board. That's really something you have to learn and watch, observe, and then learn.
Thanks. Well, that segues very nicely into the first question that we've had from the audience, which is effective and open communication between management and the board is essential to providing good governance and oversight. No disagreement there. As a director, how do you ensure that you receive straight talk from your management team and not just the party line or what they think the board wants to hear? I'll let either one of you, whichever one wants to jump in first.
Well, I can go first on this
Okay.
one. I really think that is one of the unique characteristics of Copper's board and its relationship with the executive team. It's a very open, candid, but very respectful, and I think this is one of the dynamics is really important for that. The point is, how do you ensure these communications provides all the information a board needs, true information, not fake news. And then you can actually make decisions that fulfill, oversight responsibilities, is really by building that relationship with the executive team. And actually at the Copper's board, I think there's some best practices. We don't just meet with executive team. We meet at the -1 layer as well. We have social happy hours. We can actually talk to the -1, sometimes even -2 management. So we can actually learn from the ground, so to speak, what's going on. And the management team has been extremely open with this, good, bad, or ugly. Maybe that is when the process is in place, we have much broader chance to look into the operation of the company. We also, every year, the board visits a plant site. And then when we go to the plant site, we actually have picnic with everybody, including operators. And then we sit with them, we chat with them. So there was a lot of different touch points to maintain that communication channel, not just a siloed single point.
Thanks. Jim?
I agree 100% with what Sharon just said. And my point, it would simply be to get outside the boardroom. Don't allow management to present their data in a boardroom without the opportunity to have some context, some feet on the ground inside the business to kind of bump that against. One of the things that was valuable to me, actually as a board chair, was being able to take independent directors to some of our facilities and let them do just what Sharon described. We were in the factories, we were on the ground, we were having the lunches or dinners with different people, including customers, frankly. And it gave, I think, that board member a lot of confidence that what he was being told in the boardroom actually was accurate. And frankly, it allowed him to point out some things to me that were opportunities for growth as an organization. And I think gave him confidence to then go back to other directors and kind of share what he'd seen. Very valuable.
Excellent. I know my experience as a board member, not only on a public company, but I was a venture capitalist. So I sat on a lot of private company boards. And we always appreciated when the CEO would bring in various members of direct reports, or Sharon, as you had said, a level down, and let them present directly to the board, because just seeing sometimes the communication dynamic between the CEO and his direct reports or her direct reports could give you a real sense and ability to ask questions directly. That again, open communication gives you that confidence that you're getting the facts and not just the party line. So I think that.
Can I just add one more thing? I should mention that I think it's very unique for Copper's board. Actually, even though we each have a certain assignment into the committees, but we all, the whole board, attend every committee meetings. So there's no silos. If you're not a committee member, you are a guest, so you listen entire time. You don't have to vote, of course. But I think for that way, so because today's world, a lot of what we do doesn't matter if it's MDC or audit or risk management or even sustainability, they're all linked. So get rid of the silo of the committees by the board is attending every single committee member. Committee meetings is really good because then we got the big picture, actually makes the true board meeting really short because everybody's already been to all the committees. So basically I think that is one thing, not many boards are doing that. I just think it's really good.
Thanks. So Jim, I think all of this conversation is a good segue into my next question for you, which was, you were a CEO and chairman. What was the most challenging experience you had in that dual role working with the board?
Oh, that's a great question. I described kind of our evolution, and the speed of things really accelerated over the last several years. We're heavy investing in the company from an operations point of view, but going through this change in the boardroom, the change in ownership. And so managing through massive change in a short period of time, it was only 2 or 2.5 years, was without a doubt the most challenging thing I've been through in the boardroom, or frankly outside of the boardroom. Emergence from Chapter 11 after 16 years is complicated, but it was the easy part. It was a matter of filing the right documents at the right point in time and paying the dividend that was required at the end. But it was pretty straightforward. What was harder was, excuse me, we've got people doing construction above us here today. What was harder was developing relationships with the new shareholder and the new board members. And that took some time to really understand each other and what each's objectives were. In the course of doing that, as we got acquainted, we learned from the trust that they wanted to sell the company in the relatively short term. We also learned that the new board members, the 5 new people that had come to the table for the first time only a month or so prior, didn't trust management at all. And so the emergence was easy. Earning the trust of both the new shareholder and the new directors was the hard part. And you could probably appreciate this because for 30 or 40 years, we'd been adversaries, the company on one side and the whole asbestos world kind of on the other. And we were forced together in a short period of time, and nobody had a chance to really warm up to each other, ever become acquainted. We're just kind of put into the pit, so to speak. So we learned a lot by doing. We tried to do things like we sent a pre-emergence packet welcoming the directors before they were even directors, but with full bios of each of the management team members and 5 years worth of financial results that were all audited, so that they could see that what we were about to communicate was indeed factual. We held a pre-emergence meeting that was one of those things I think people were concerned that I asked to do it, but we got them together for the first time about 2 weeks before we emerged, so that they had a chance to meet us in person, and we had a chance to introduce the business at a little bit further level. And then we held regular board meetings, about roughly bi-weekly for the first 60 days or so, to drill down on different parts of the business or markets or products or people or wherever they wanted to go. There had been a lot of history prior to emergence. It's kind of interesting and I think unique to our circumstance. We had a member of the Trust Advisory Committee call us in the fall of 2015 and say, I have a buyer ready to buy your company lock, stock, and barrel. Can you send me a current valuation? Well, it wasn't really an appropriate question to ask. It wasn't an appropriate time to ask it, but it really shook us to our core. And I was able to convince then the current board, the Corning and PPG board members, that we needed to go engage an investment bank to at least help us come up with a market-based valuation on the business. And we did that. But when the new board members were appointed, we'd been transparent about what we'd done, but they heard the name of the investment bank, which is one of the names you would all recognize, and they became panicked that management was out working on a deal without their involvement or without board oversight or authority. So it took a little bit of time to get them on track to understand what we had done, which was basically let an investment bank look under the curtain and give us an assessment based on market data that they had. What we hadn't done is gone out and marketed the company in any way, shape, or form. We were also at the time getting inbound calls from strategic buyers, even a couple financial buyers. So handling those and making sure that we were transparent about what we'd done with this investment bank and what we'd done with the potential buyers who were approaching us was a big, big thing. And I think that transparency kind of, it helped. And finally, I think the thing that unlocked the relationship to the new board members was they had been appointed, but nobody ever said to them, this is how you're going to be compensated. So it was one of those, little secrets. It was kind of under the table, the awkward elephant in the room. And we had to do some work on that. And I did two things. One, we paid them a fantastic retainer compared to all of the relevant benchmarks that we had. But the second thing was we gave them a ton of upside that was tied directly to the same equity compensation table that the management team had. So they could see that we were going to march step by step together. It wasn't going to be somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And I think that all of those things kind of as they kind of built upon each other, led us to the point that we finally developed a pretty good working relationship when we got through the last chapter, which was the sale of the company. So that was the toughest thing.
Great. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Sharon, before I ask you the next question, we do have a question from the audience as a follow-on to your last question, which is, how do you deal with the fire hose effect?
Yes, I did see that question. Very, very interesting. How much material you really needed to learn and manage, and even for one committee, how do you attend all committee meetings? That's a really good question. So we did struggle through that. I think we kind of find a good solution. I'm happy to share. So right now we use Diligent portal, right? So all materials for the board meeting usually is posted about 2 weeks before the board meeting. And we all really diligently read through them, so we don't go through them at the committee. So the reports usually, if you have 60 slides, they usually pick about 5 or 6, the really important ones that we all feel like we have questions, we need a clarification, we need a deliberate need to discuss. So those are the ones talked about in the committee instead of every slide through that. This is not possible, right? So we have been trying that model for several years now. It's really, really effective because then you really spend the time, have a conversation instead of just, looking through 60 slides. But it does require significant amount of reading before the board meeting. And it's very, at the beginning, it's a sort of a try and error because the executive team wasn't sure if they don't cover everything, do we get all the information? And we have to reassure them, yes, we read it, we just have these questions. So now everybody's got into that flow. Everybody is very, very comfortable, but I think it's a very effective way instead of sitting through hundreds of slides. Really read them ahead of time and highlight the ones you can let the presenter know these are the slides we wanted to talk about. So that's how we manage it.
Yeah, I know a number of I actually chair a nonprofit board, and we all try to use the consent agenda, right? Give everybody kind of the minutes and the other things, like, again, focus on the things that you need to have those strategic discussions about versus going through everything that nobody has a question on and can be a bit more informative than it is, point of discussion. So thank you. So the other question I think is actually probably good for both of you guys. Sharon spoke about the importance of risk oversight at the board level. How frequent in your experience is risk assessment and monitoring shared with the board's risk committee? And how are enterprise risks prioritized? And I think this question is probably particularly important given the unique and unprecedented risks that so many, every company is dealing with in the current pandemic. So, Jim, why don't I turn it to you, and then we'll circle back to Sharon for her thoughts on it.
That's a great question. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about this exact question over the last 5 or 6 months. And in the course of my career, I don't know how many risk assessments I participated in or was involved in presenting or justifying or having some ownership of. And every one of those, we talked a lot about catastrophic kinds of things. We talked a lot about geopolitical kinds of things. And pandemic was always kind of one of those things that was on the list, but it was way off on the side of the board, and it never made the final cut in an 80-20 sense. And boy, have we learned from that. I think at this point.
You'd be amazed at how many force majeure clauses that I'm seeing in contracts that now use the word pandemic that never had it before.
Yeah, and with my background, I've also thought about what should companies be doing now to protect them from the plaintiff's attorneys who will see this as a business opportunity. And
yep.
I don't have a great conclusion on that, other than to make sure to follow the CDC guidelines religiously, and don't divert from that, so that you have a good defense. But it's very, very challenging time that way.
Sharon, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so actually this is why about 2-3 years ago, the board decided we actually going to have a strategy and the risk committee. Interesting enough, you link those two together, is because the risk mitigation and oversight of risk mitigation takes a strategic broad view. And it is part of our fiduciary duty to manage this for our stakeholders and shareholders. So because that committee now, of course, every board meeting, we have a time dedicated to really study what are the different kind of risks we're facing. We have a fairly thorough matrix put together. Like Jim said, we have different type of risks based on its level of impact and also the likelihood it's going to happen. Even though we thought we had a very good process, so we didn't get to the pandemic either. So Jim, don't feel too bad. So it took us by surprise as well. But at least we have a process now. We can escalate some of these risks like pandemic to the highest level. Then once it's there, you have a dedicated team from an executive side to really deal with it, and then reporting back to the board. And then the risk committee and audit committee really work hand in hand, as you know, because the financial impact and the possibility of we have to put aside one of the resources needed to deal with that risk is completely connected. So now we talk about that every board meeting. I think that is definitely something we can afford not to do.
Great, thank you. So Sharon, Copper's board is known for its diversity, being the final nominee for the National NACD Award in this category 2019. Congratulations.
Thank you.
When did the journey of diversity start for your board, and what are some of the challenges for the board in this area?
Yeah, so I kind of said a little bit early on, when I get on the board, I already see the board has the intentionally going to diversify its compositions. So I was the second woman on the board. There's already an African-American on the board. It's in an industry that we are much more diverse than the industry diversity profile, if you will. So we have really seen the benefit of having, and also the diversity doesn't need to be gender or race. We have very different backgrounds. Like I am a scientist, and our board chairman actually is more of a scholar, so to speak. Then we have, of course, enough business and finance and legal expertise on the board. So I think the diversity of background expertise brings very good perspectives to the board. So our board always had a very healthy open environment for debating anything. We have a lot of different ideas, and it really helps us to make decisions and also make a decision effectively. And that the board would like to not only continue that, but even do better. So we actually did a skill set inventory to say, well, currently these are the board members, what are the different skill sets they bring to the table based on their expertise or experiences, and then really look at what are the gaps we still have. So when we have a chance to replace a outgoing board member with a new member, we are intentionally to look at those skill sets that we still have gap. For example, in the last turnover, which is, we had 3 board members going out at the same time. It's really a challenge. But we were very, very intentional. We want to continue the diversity journey. So we want to find those candidates with these diversity background. But we also identify, for example, for a conventional, traditional company like Koppers, one of the skill gap on our board member is to deal with the latest, the Gen XYZ, I don't know which Gen it is, workforces. What kind of, how to attract them, how to retain them, how to motivate them. These are all of those questions. Actually, at the time, none of the current board members really have expertise. So we actually gone out physically looking for that skill set for the new board member. And so I think it takes intentionality to maintain the diversity. And we also, through that turnover, we actually increased the diversity. Now we have 3 women and 2 African-American on the board. And one of the challenges we did find through that journey is if we limited our sources of our talent pool locally, regionally even, it is a challenge. So, I mean, we are a Pittsburgh company. We would love, a lot of us are from Pittsburgh, but just because the availability of those candidates with the diversity background and expertise, we end up using a national third party to help us to search nationally. That's how we got our new board member. So that is the challenge I think every board probably would face, is the availability of those talent pools. And of course, they are highly sought after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And hopefully they continue to be sought after as boards continue to all take a diversity journey as Koppers has.
Right.
So Tim, we've heard a lot of really interesting information and for your board journey. So looking back, what would you say you're most proud of with respect to your board work?
Well, I think that one's pretty easy. We managed through that period of time that was so crazy. We came out on the other end in very good shape. We emerged from chapter level with lots of momentum that put us in a great position to work through a sale process. We found a terrific new owner for the business. We were able to keep the organization intact. We didn't have a lot of turnover. We were able to keep our customers calm through all of that. So our results continued to look very good. And by the time we finished, the group of people that couldn't trust each other at the beginning ended up selling this company for 10 times EBITDA, and we'd added about 40% EVA to the business in its last 5 years as a equity affiliate of Corning and PPG. So the new shareholder was happy, the employees were happy, those of us that had to leave were happy. It all worked out.
A great end to a very long and arduous journey.
I'll say.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Sharon, what are some of the changes that you've witnessed of today's Koppers board from the one that you first joined? And how did the board help usher in those changes?
That's actually a great question. I was thinking about that. Well, the 2 biggest changes in these 11 years I've been on the board, one is we changed the CEO. And that's one of the very big changes a board have to usher through, right? And it's one of our most important job is to make sure we have the right CEO. We had a wonderful CEO, has been there since our IPO. And through the whole process that we now have a very talented CEO, Leroy Ball. And I think that was one of those challenging and you really lose sleep over type of period as a board member. Make sure you get the right CEO, and then as Leroy take over the head of the company, he has a very different vision for the company, what kind of company he wants to lead. So the company actually went through a very significant transformation of its identity. So the Koppers was a traditional carbon material company who distills all the coal tars for aluminum, electrodes, that sort of application, very, very traditionally highly tied into oil gas industry and, aluminum steel industry. And the Leroy has this vision, the company wanted to be really to stay on the cutting edge of sustainability. We wanted to be a company provides all the solutions for wood protection, wood preservation, even though that was part of the Koppers portfolio before, but it wasn't the focus actually. So we kind of turned the company on its head. You have to really remake company's brand, the identity, and also, it's a really huge transformation. So that is some period, I think it really thanks for the really wonderful relationship and the trust between the CEO and the board. We walked through a journey over the last couple of years. It's been really successful. And then with the current, situation, you can see actually as a shareholder, this is a much better portfolio they have with Koppers, that they are no longer tied into oil gas or steel or aluminum, because those cyclicality is all together same. But with wood preservation, it's so broad. We provide railway ties for railroad. We provide decking materials preservation. We provide utility poles. And then all these markets, cyclicality is different. So it provides a much more balanced portfolio. But to make that change, it's not easy because it's a huge deviation from what the tradition of the company is. But I think CEO has the vision, CEO has led this journey, and the board was with him, not without anxiety, but I think we made it happen.
Excellent. Thank you. So Jim, looking back, if you could do it over, is there anything that you would do differently?
That's a great question. I think if I had it to do over again, I would have been more assertive about trying to reach past the wall of the bankruptcy world to talk to some of the trust advisory committee members early on, because they were going to be the people that set everything up from a governance point of view post Chapter 11. And in that sense, I would have liked to have been involved, maybe not as at least as an observer, in the selection of the new board members, so that instead of coming at it cold on only a couple weeks' notice, we had a chance to cultivate those relationships earlier on. The other thing, if I had solved the board compensation issue earlier, I think it would have made for a lot smoother sledding. So instead of starting from a standstill, I would have at least had that in my back pocket to get us going. Other than that, I wish I could have convinced the trustees to have held the company. It was a fantastic company, generated outstanding returns, and it would have looked good in anybody's portfolio except somebody like a trust that's totally risk averse. But I think we would have made them proud, and I think it was a great company would have been a great company to allow to continue the way it was.
Great. Thank you. Sharon, we're going to come back to you. So when you look to the future, what do you see as something that the board can do more of to further strengthen the future of the company? Both, I guess, generically or particularly as to Koppers.
Yeah, so actually, it's really something our board has been thinking of. So a lot of times, our efforts, of course, for rightfully so, are focused on compliance and make sure, especially as a public traded company. That's a huge piece of our work. But we have recently increasingly trying to pay more attention to where the company is going, looking out in terms of strategy. So we worked together with the executive team to say, let's look not just next a year or two, because that's what the shareholder want to know. What's your prediction for next year? Well, you have to give them that for sure. But our job is to really help the company to look further beyond that. What are the mega trends going to be there to impact your business? How you're going to grow truly, right? Instead of just in a very sort of tactical way, how is the strategy can make this company and dream the big dreams. So don't just say maybe we can add another couple base points onto the stock price. What if you can double it? What would you do to double that, right? How is the future could really be dreamed up? And I think to have those conversations more really is helpful. So we actually now have a special meeting. It's not a typical board meeting, so we don't go through all the committee, whatever. So every year, December, we have a special meeting, really talk about strategy, outlook, really to brainstorm what are the things we really still need to look for to continue to add value to our shareholders. So I think that we can do more. I personally enjoy that aspect really very much, because it takes a lot of imagination and also looking out of your sort of playground to see what's out there for you to go after. I think that's exciting, and the board should do more of that.
Great. And that's a great example, sort of circling back to what you had talked about earlier and making sure, you board strategic role versus operational role that you're used to possibly in your day job. What you just described is, the quintessential role of the board, right? One of its key functions is, right, the strategic planning and thinking outside the box and having those. So it's great that you devote specific time to it, because unfortunately a lot of boards, I think, get so caught up in, like you said, the committee and the other things that they need to do, risk management, oversight, et cetera, that never seems to get as much time as it deserves. So
right,
that's
exactly.
that's great. So Jim, back to you. How has the Director of the Year award been helpful to you, and what did you learn from the process?
That's a good question. It was not something that I sought. In fact, one of the new directors came to me at one point and said, "Hey, I've heard that there's a competition, a Director of the Year competition. You should participate." And at first I was reluctant because we had so many other things going on at the time. And he convinced me that it would be good, that it would be beneficial. But I really didn't understand how beneficial until I actually went through the process. I think first it gave me a chance to sit back and reflect on this journey that we'd been on, and some of the things that I've shared in the last period of time. And that was, reflection time was something that hadn't been available to me for a while at that point. I think it also exposed me to good benchmarks. And I just point to the copper story that Sharon is sharing as one that helps in terms of my personal edification, as well as value to future board roles. I think a third thing it did was it gave me exposure to NACD and the resources that are available. I mean, absolutely tremendous. If you have not availed yourself to the resources NACD offers, I would encourage you to look into it, because it is outstanding. So I guess the bottom line is those are three ways it was helpful to me, and I'd highly recommend anybody that has even a remote interest in participating. You'll grow from it, and that's the important thing.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have one more question that I want to make sure we get to. Great speakers, terrific experience, governance examples. Will their background and contact information be available to attendees? You can contact, if you have any further questions for Jim or Sharon, feel free to contact either Kelly or Makai, and we can get you in touch with them rather than broadcasting their contact information over the World Wide Web. But thank you, and thank you for the compliment. Being respectful of people's times, as much as I enjoy all these Zoom calls, we're going to start to wrap up. I'll keep an eye out for any further questions. But Jim and Sharon, thank you so much for sharing the wealth of experience that you've had during your board service. I'm going to start with Sharon, and I'm going to go back to Jim. Any sort of closing remarks, any further thoughts, especially, like I said, in the challenging times that every board finds themselves in the current situation?
Yeah, I would just wanted to say this is the time, it's really exciting and to be a board member, because there are so many different moving pieces you have to deal with. It is a lot of work, but it is a really wonderful experience. So I really say this is one of those learning journeys. It never ends. Just keep learning new things and bring new values to the board. And I think, again, putting a plug for NACD and the Three River Chapter, these kind of sessions really helps us to learn from each other. For example, I learned a lot from Jim, to really getting better and better at what we do, and then we can bring more value to the shareholders. So just exciting time. Thanks.
Jim?
I certainly appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you all this afternoon. As I've thought about the situation that we're in from a board point of view, I think I'd offer two things just to keep in mind for those of you that are sitting on your boards. One is with respect to the cultures. With people working remotely, teams aren't together the way that they have been traditionally. So I would admonish you to make sure that you're looking out for the culture so that it doesn't get lost in all the crazy stuff that is going on. And then the second thing I think from a board point of view is that there's a time for the break, and there's a time for gas. And as we get hopefully more toward the end than we are the beginning, I would encourage those of you that have the responsibility to be going back to your companies, to your boardrooms, asking management to make sure that they've considered how this may or may not impact their strategic plan, the timing, the projections, and all that sort of thing, and maybe what new opportunities it has opened their eyes to. There is no time like the present to kind of jot down the things that are the biggest learnings. So those would be the two things that I would offer.
Great. Well, thank you again for all your time, both in preparing and in participating for today, and for your generosity and sharing your wisdom and experience with everybody on the call. Thank you to everybody who has attended today. A survey link will be emailed to you following this event. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. It helps us to make sure that we're delivering content that is helpful and useful to you. Please also mark your calendars for December 8th, 9th, and 10th for our second annual Future of Board Leadership Symposium. Watch your email for further information. It will be virtual, and we hope that you will join us. We wish you a wonderful and safe holiday season. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at one of our future programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Sharon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.